Did you ever test and find that Heisenberg's bound is lower than it should be, or higher than it should be?
You're leading the witness, I think. So, no, what we frequently call Heisenberg's bound is a rigorous theorem about quantum mechanics. Again, not about reality, but about quantum mechanics. Not originally proved by Heisenberg, but by others, notably Robertson and Walker and Schrödinger as well. And it's completely accurate. The story we tell when we talk about Heisenberg's bound is kind of funny, and the way Heisenberg originally wrote about it as well. He had this brilliant Gedanken experiment of measuring the position of a particle by using a microscope. How else do you measure the position of a particle? But again, coming back to this 20th century evolution of the observer effect and self-referentiality and recursion, he imagined that to measure it, you would have to bounce light off it and have that hit your screen or your eye or whatever, and that light could disturb the system. Now, of course, we know that when you measure a system, when I ask you a question, I might affect you. But we always imagine pre-quantum mechanics that in principle you could be as gentle as you liked. And what Heisenberg argued is that wasn't true. And that to measure the position of the electron to a given precision, you needed to disturb its momentum by more than a certain amount, h bar over twice the uncertainty in that position. And that's usually the first way we introduce the uncertainty principle. Then we get up to the math and we show, actually, you can show it's not just the measurement disturbing the system. It's a property of the quantum states themselves. They have this intrinsic uncertainty. And I would always have told students, so Heisenberg was right, but this goes even further beyond that. It's even deeper. And about 20 years ago, a little more, I think, a guy named Masanobu in Japan proved that the original statement wasn't even correct. That you could, under certain occasions, measure a system and disturb it by less than h bar over twice the position uncertainty you wanted. There was still a finite disturbance. He just calculated a new bound, and he found sometimes his bound was smaller than Heisenberg's original. And I should be careful. Again, we have to define what we mean by these quantities. What do we mean by measurement uncertainty? I think his definition is eminently reasonable and very operational. It connects to an experiment we were able to do. So we did confirm that by that definition, the disturbance could be less than what you would think from Heisenberg's bound. But again, the rigorously proven Heisenberg uncertainty principle in all of our quantum textbooks is not about the disturbance due to a measurement. So it remains correct. It's just taking that same formula and applying it carelessly to a different situation, which we all thought made sense, that I now realize was just too rash.
Your personal data is scattered across the internet like shrapnel. Incogni exists to retrieve it. When we explore consciousness or free will on this show, we engage in cataphatic inquiry, so positively asserting what something is. Data brokers do precisely that to you, asserting your address, your phone number, your social security number, even your relatives' information. These exposed data points are weaponizable. Data breaches increased by 211% from 2023 to 2024. Criminals use your information for identity theft, scams, stalking. You could spend hundreds of hours in a nation drained, exhausted, manually requesting removals from each site. Or Incogni can handle that for you automatically. They contact hundreds of data brokers on your behalf, repeatedly removing data. Their unlimited plan includes custom removals. So send any link where your data appears and they'll take it down. They're the only service independently verified by Deloitte. Just like we have to shed our braggadocious egos to make progress in philosophy and physics, and likewise, it's useful, even vital, to shed your digital traces. Take your personal data back with Incogni. Use code CURT at the link below and get 60% off an annual plan. That's incogni.com/CURT. They can't harm you if they can't find you. Many people, as you said, when they're being told about Heisenberg's uncertainty, they're given this mental image of, suppose you want to measure a bear, some object, let's just imagine it's a bear, I think, because that was the original textbook that I read. And they say you throw basketballs, again, it was basketballs or volleyballs or what have you.
Mhm.
And if you make the objects more refined, like tennis balls, and all of a sudden smaller and smaller, then you're able to resolve smaller and smaller.
Actually, it turns out, I see, if you make them physically smaller.
Yes. But the picture is a classical picture that you're hitting it and disturbing it. So what is the picture that you have? How about, let's not say what is the actual picture, because who knows? What is the picture that Professor Steinberg has of Heisenberg's uncertainty? How would you teach it in order to not give misleading ideas?
Yeah, it's a great question. The first time I had to teach it after doing this experiment, I realized I was still saying it wrong. I think the historical story remains a good one. I think it captures most of the truth. I think it's just this particular mathematical equality that's tricky. I think the Heisenberg microscope case that Feynman also talks about is a very idealized and somewhat realistic case where the disturbance really does come from momentum transfer between the probe, these basketballs or tennis balls, and the object being probed. The question again is, how uncertain does it need to be? One thing you can imagine, I throw tennis balls at you, they bounce off at some angle. Depending on the angle at which they bounce off, you recoil a little bit. Since they bounce off at all different angles, you're buffeted around. But if I throw one tennis ball at you, and they say, all right, Curt's probably moving somewhere now, I don't know in what direction. But then I catch the tennis ball over here. As I catch that, I say, oh, now I know exactly how much momentum was transferred. There's no more uncertainty. I know exactly what happened to Curt. And that's true of quantum mechanical measurement interactions. If I look at the tennis ball and I measure its final momentum, I've learned exactly what momentum disturbance I did to you. Turns out, and you can understand this from the optics of it, if I do that, I can't use that tennis ball to image where you are. I have no position resolution. And in order to get good position resolution, I have to open up my aperture, basically. And as I open up my aperture, I lose information about the momentum. So there's the trade-off. The more I open the aperture, the more information I get about your position, but the more I need to disturb your momentum. I think that remains a really good picture. We can write it more mathematically about a much more general interaction, but you get the same idea that in order for me to have resolution in position, there needs to be uncertainty in how much momentum I can transfer to you. And I still have the choice later on to remeasure that momentum and get rid of the uncertainty. But to do that, I have to give up the information.
It still seems like a problem is that tale can be told about purely classically. That is, there's nothing that Heisenberg needs to, or anyone needs to know about quantum mechanics in order to come up with that. About momentum transfer, for instance, or opening up an aperture, no?
Except for the fact that there's a fundamental limit. Classically, there's no reason that I couldn't throw tiny marbles at you that had almost no momentum and very good position resolution. And I'd get very good resolution and you wouldn't really feel the marbles. I mean, right now that's what I'm doing, right? We're shining 10 to the 18 photons per second off of you in this room. And a few of them are hitting my eye and I'm getting pretty good information about your position. And they're really not disturbing your momentum measurably at all. But there's a limit to how far you can go. And that limit does not depend on which projectiles I use. Doesn't matter whether I used, visible photons, gamma rays, electrons, nitrogen molecules. The limit just has to do with the relationship between your position uncertainty and your momentum uncertainty.
I guess what I'm getting at is that it's still in quantum mechanics that the energy of a photon is a continuous spectrum from zero upward. So you could go as close to zero as you want. The Heisenberg uncertainty doesn't seem to be because you can't get as weak as you like, and we're going to talk about weak measurements, but it doesn't seem to be about that. So it seems to be about something else, if we're going to tell this sort of tale with words.
Well, it's not just about the energy. And again, it's more about the momentum transfer. If the particle has so little momentum that no matter what direction you scatter it in, the momentum transfer is really, really small, then it turns out that guarantees quantum mechanically that it can't measure your position to very good resolution. And fundamentally, that's why we use high energy particles to build accelerators. They make good microscopes. You want to learn about the structure of matter on a scale smaller than a Fermi, you need particles that have at least a GeV of momentum or of energy. Classically, there'd be no such restriction, right? You'd think, let me go to smaller and smaller marbles and then grains of sand and then particles of dust, and they're smaller and they're lighter and they have less momentum. I win on all fronts. And quantum mechanically, there's this limit where the lighter they become, the worse my position resolution becomes. That's what doesn't exist classically.
Weak measurement.
Okay. So far I was talking about a kind of discrete measurement. You know, I fire one particle at you, and looking at where it bounces off, I can either learn what the momentum exchange was or the position. If I don't want to disturb you very much, I use a particle that's not going to have a very big momentum change. And what we discover is I can't have very good resolution. I'm not going to get a lot of information about where you are. Then again, whenever real-world experimentalists do measurements, they know it's hard to get a lot of information from any one measurement. That's why we take measurement for hours or years, if we're CERN or something like that, and we average and build up statistics. It's not that we learned about the existence of the Higgs boson from one muon that landed in one detector somewhere. We needed to do the statistics. So in the 1980s, Yakir Aharonov and his collaborators started thinking about this and realized I can do a measurement that doesn't disturb the system very much. And if I do it millions of times and I look at the average, I still learn on average what the system was doing. I don't learn on one particular trial exactly where it was, but maybe that's not what I'm interested in. So the reason this gets people like me excited is because there's a strange issue in quantum mechanics where we're often told not to think too much about the past, not to think about the history of a system or how to get where it is. In fact, we're told, unless you actually built your experiment to measure X at the end of the day, you shouldn't even talk about X. Only talk about the things that you've built your apparatus to measure. And those of us who are realists want to say, well, I'd like to say something about what X was before I measured it, or what P was before I measured it. I mean, to me, the simplest case is the following. Fire a particle from this position, detect it over here at this position, and ask how fast was it moving or what angle was it moving at. Classically, I'd say, well, obviously it must have been moving along that line, right? Quantum mechanically, that's not so clear. And yet, we ask ourselves, is there some way I could talk about what the average momentum of the particle had been after I emitted it, but before I detected it? And the problem is, you need to condition on this detection event. You have to say, I don't just want to look at the whole wave function, and the whole wave function is spreading out all over the place, and its average momentum is 0. I want to know just about the part of the wave function that reached this detector. How do you even begin to calculate that? And the reason that, let's say, from the 1960s to the 1980s, this seemed like an intractable problem was that if I did measure the momentum along the way, I would disturb the particle. We've just been talking about how measurements disturb particles. And then if I happened to find the particle at my detector, I'd say, well, it's not that that was the path the particle was taking to the detector. It's just that you kicked the particle when you made this measurement, and that's what sent it to the detector. So this is why, starting in 1988, when Aharonov, Albert, and Weidmann realized that you could make the measurements weakly, they were able to say, wait a second, if we kept measuring this average momentum or whatever we wanted to know, but without disturbing the particle, then sometimes the particle would reach this final detector. And on those occasions, I could go back and look at my measurement result and say, on average, whenever the particle made it there, this is what my meter read. So this was the average momentum, not of all the particles, but of the particles that made it from point A to point B. So I wish they hadn't named these things weak measurements. To me, what's interesting about it is they're conditional measurements. It made it possible quantum mechanically to say, what is the average momentum of the particles that later on are guaranteed to get to this point? if I find the particle here, what was it doing before it got there? And that's something that a lot of traditional textbook quantum mechanics had denied being even possible. So in this quest to understand what is quantum mechanics really telling us about the nature of the world, about external reality, it seemed really important to me to be able to correlate final events with these measurements. And that's what weak measurement allows.
Is there something more to weak measurements than simply measuring a system's weekly over and over in order to get some picture, but just many hazy pictures, but then you average out these pictures? Because it seems like that wouldn't take until the 80s then. It seems like 5 years after Heisenberg already put that idea in our minds, we would have thought, well, why don't we just disturb it less and less, but take many snapshots or many.
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't know of earlier work on it, but of course, everything these guys did is building on the 1926 theory of quantum mechanics. And there's no good reason that someone in the 1930s could not have done this, except it's not what they were looking for. It's not what they were motivated to do. We've all been trained with the idea of a measurement as this kind of mathematical operation where you get a precise result. And of course, everyone knew early on, no measurement is absolutely precise. But the normal approach of physicists is to say, well, that's just experimental reality. We'll deal with that later. We'll add the uncertainties later and say, okay, we can't do the perfect job, but this is, the gold standard that we're aiming at. And it was really new to say, no, we actually want the uncertainty. I think there was also a conceptual shift. Another of Aharonof's big interests has been in the time symmetry of quantum mechanics. So like classical physics, all of quantum mechanics, leaving aside weak interactions, which isn't really fundamental to quantum mechanics, is time reversal invariant, meaning it is just as easy or difficult to predict the future from my present observations as to retrodict the past. There's no mathematical difference between the two. Except we're also taught in quantum mechanics that there's measurement, and that measurement is this mystical event that we never define really clearly, but that breaks the time symmetry, because after a measurement, the state is completely reset. There's no experimental evidence whatsoever that we need to think of that as breaking time reversal symmetry. There's no reason when I find a particle at some position that I have to use that new state to calculate the future wave function, but something different to calculate the past. And yet that's what we were all taught. And Curt has been struggling for decades with the question of how to make sense of the symmetry of quantum mechanics. So he really wanted to say, if I know what a system was doing at t equals 0, and I know what a system is doing at t equals 1, both of those pieces of information should be equally useful to tell me what was going on at t equals 0.5. And it's weak measurement that allowed him to mathematically show that that was true.
Hi, everyone. Hope you're enjoying today's episode. If you're hungry for deeper dives into physics, AI, consciousness, philosophy, along with my personal reflections, you'll find it all on my Substack. Subscribers get first access to new episodes, new posts as well, behind-the-scenes insights, and the chance to be a part of a thriving community of like-minded pilgrimers. By joining, you'll directly be supporting my work and helping keep these conversations at the cutting edge. So click the link on screen here, hit subscribe, and let's keep pushing the boundaries of knowledge together. Thank you and enjoy the show. Just so you know, if you're listening, it's CurtJaimungal.org, CurtJaimungal.org.